So I guess we can start. Well, welcome everybody. I see there's actually quite an attendance. Thank you for joining us. Obviously today it's a very interesting and very exciting topic that I'm going to present to you. Obviously our new Folio screens and the functionalities that come along with the new Folio screens. So that would be our topic for today. Very exciting, and I see that quite a lot of people have registered and are still joining the webinar. So, as I start, as always, my name is Celia. I'm one of the knowledge specialists here at Clock, and I will have the pleasure to present to you today the new Folio screens and the new functionalities. Obviously, with many of you, we've worked together either in onboardings or just with support questions. With others, I haven't had the pleasure to be in touch. Hopefully, in the future, we will have the chance to touch base. So, what are we going to talk today about? Well, obviously, the main topic is the new folios, but more specifically, what are we going to see? So firstly, of course, we're going to see the overview of the new Folio screens. So when you see the new Folio, when you open a new Folio, what are you seeing on the page? What are the different buttons doing? Where are the functionalities that you are used to from before? Where are they located in the new Folio screens? So that is what we're going to see first. Then we're going to spend some time on the posting of charges and essentially managing group folios and some other functionalities, new functionalities related to charges. We're going to talk about some other new functions that we have introduced as a whole for the new folios. And we're going to talk about also how the new concept of creating partial corrections. And I know that we actually, in the agenda, initially in the invitation, we mentioned that we're also going to talk about the new concept of deposits and advance payments that comes along with the new deposit folios. However, after some further analysis, we came to the conclusion that that is a topic for a webinar on its own. So do pay attention for our next invite, which would be for a webinar strictly connected to deposits and advance payments. And anyway, actually, in one of our upcoming updates, there will be even more improvements related to deposit and advance payments. So that is why we are actually going to separate that topic altogether in another webinar that we're going to do fairly soon, essentially in the future. So a couple of points before we start with going into the new folios and going into the system. A couple of very important points. Now, obviously, here we're going to talk about some functionalities that are new in the system, about invoicing, finance, and accounting. What I'm going to show you is basically what the new functionalities do, how you can use them, and potentially cases where they are applicable. However, since accounting, invoicing is very specific from country to country, you should always have this in mind if this, for example, function that I will show you is going to be applicable for your local law, your local accounting and invoicing law, or your local accounting practices. So this is obviously something to bear in mind, that we're going to see the functionalities as is, but if they are applicable in your case, really depends on your local law and accounting practices. So maybe if something looks, some functionality is very interesting for you, just double check with your accounting team or finance team if that is something that you can use based on your local law in your country. So that is just as a point of attention for you to be aware of and to have in mind. And without further ado, I suggest that we jump into the system and into the folios. I believe now everybody should be seeing my account and my system. And actually, I have opened an event that I have with a folio in it. Um, Regardless, is it a booking folio, a folio in a company profile, etc., you always have the new button here, which allows you access to the new version, to the new folios of the system. Now, I know that this would be a major question that will come up from many of you. How long will the new folios be basically secondary? Um, Rest assured, the old version of the current main version of the folios will remain active and default for at least several months. So there will be plenty of time to get used to the new folios, how they work, excuse me, and all the various functionalities surrounding them. My personal recommendation is as quick as possible, but slowly and surely get used to the new folios. Maybe process in a day several folios just from the new screen so that everybody can get used to them, so that once in the future we make the switch and the new folios to be the default ones, to everybody to already have the experience with the new folios. So this is my personal recommendation. Of course, it's really up to you how you want to implement this and how you want to get used to the new folios. So coming back into the system, I've just opened the folio, and this is what we're seeing. Now, obviously, some of the improvements here, they're completely self-explanatory. Essentially, we do have the new modern look of the folios, and of course, they're very much optimized in terms of mechanics, and you'll see what I'm talking about exactly in a moment. Just before I proceed, there was a quick question: is there going to be a recording? Yes, there will be a recording of this meeting, which we're going to send out after several days after today, along with answers to any questions. So feel free to write any questions that you want in the Q&A button that you see. However, we are not going to be actually replying today because we do anticipate quite a lot of questions, because also there are quite a lot of attendees. And essentially, we'll gather all these questions, we'll answer them written, and along with the recording, we will send to each and every one that has registered for the webinar. We're going to send the recording along with answers of the questions that were asked now during the webinar. So yeah, feel free to write your questions in the Q&A box below. Great. So coming back here to the folio, this is the main page of the folio. Whenever you open it, you see it's quite more compact compared to before, and we have quite some buttons. Now, rest assured, every function and option that you are familiar from before, from the old version, is available here in the new version. So, for example, here below under the edit button, we have the options to give a name to the folio. You have the purchase order options, you have the hide from the self-service portal. So all those functions from before and options, they're still available here, rest assured. Here we have the print button, which will open the print preview of the folio, from where you can print it out, or just view how the invoice will look like, or change the mode or the template that you're using. You see all the options from before are still here. While sending a bill or an invoice via email happens from the letter button from here, and you can proceed to send this folio or invoice via email, same as before. Changing billing details obviously happens from here. So in general, you see that everything is still here that it was before, just structured a little bit differently, and there are actually quicker buttons for some of the functionalities, like sending the email, or just doing the print preview. You have those buttons here. We have the charges section, we have the payment section, and of course, what is the balance. Now, as mentioned, some of the improvements with the new Folio screen relates a lot to a lot of charges. When you have a folio with a lot of charges, either just one booking that has a very long stay or used quite a lot of extra services, for example, or if there is a folio, a group folio, let's say, with charges from a lot of bookings posted into that one folio. Some of you may know that when there are too many charges in a folio before, that was causing some slower operation, let's say. However, that is now fully optimized, and that is not really an issue. The folios work perfectly with a lot of charges, with a lot of bookings. And we'll see that in a second, exactly what I'm referring to. One of the main differences, or let's say not differences, but changes and improvements, are actually related exactly to the charges section. So to get out of the way, how do we charge something extra to a folio? Where you have firstly the plus button here at the top, or the plus button here. Simply you click it and you see these are still the template groups that you are familiar from before, the yellow boxes that there were before in the old folios. And simply you, as before, you just simply locate your extra service or charge that you want. And when you click it, the system will just ask you for which day do we want to post it. Is it going to be for today's date? If it's a future booking, we'll suggest the arrival day of the booking, basically as before. Or if we want to post it for a longer period, we can just click on period and select, okay, we want to post this from this until this date. We click on add, and here we have a summary of what we are posting. So one breakfast, one quantity times 3 days for these respective days. And once I click on charge, that is now posted into the folio. So you see that the procedure is more or less the same as before. We still have the option to select days or even change quantity if needed, depending on the user rights. We can also, of course, change the quantity and post several of these charges for a particular day. This is how we're posting a charge. You see, quite straightforward, nothing too different from what you might be used to. The major difference and the major improvement comes when we actually click here on details. And now I'm, for the purposes of this webinar and for this presentation, I'm using an event folio, an event folio, which I'm using for a group. A lot of you know that essentially the events module is also very useful for handling and managing group reservations, not just events. And I have transferred all the charges of the various different bookings into this one event folio that we see here. And as you can see, actually, each booking is from which a charge has been transferred is listed down here. And we have the plus button so that we can open and see the charges related to the respective booking. So by this way, we ensure proper optimization, everything gets loaded, there is no possibilities of the system getting slower if there are too many charges and bookings, just because the main difference is that if you recall before, the charges are always listed down. Well, in this case, you need to click the plus button so that they actually show up and they're loaded on the screen. So that heavily optimizes the work of the new folios. Coming back here, one of the major and one of the goals as well, not just major improvement, but the goals that we have with the new folios is also to, of course, make things user-friendly, make things quicker for you to find and locate, and also prevent any mistakes, accidental or not, by users. That is especially applicable when we see in a moment the partial corrections that we see, or the calculation of the discount that we'll see in a moment. But one of the things that will improve and optimize your work, especially when we have such a folio where we have many different reservations and many different charges, is the fact that we essentially have different search options and filters where we can filter down the various charges. We can say that maybe we want to see and maybe modify a charge for this booking that is just for the 9th of June. So you see how now only the 9th of June shows up for me. Or I want to locate just a specific charge, so I can search it by the charge name. So this way I can filter down the results and only get what I need to, let's say, modify, for example. So these options here, these search options would be extremely useful. We can, for example, grab a particular booking from this group reservation, use it in our search, and essentially we'll be seeing either just that particular reservation or all the bookings that have that same reference number. As you can see, it does find essentially also based on the reference number. So here, these search filters will make your work with the folios, large folios with many charges, much more easier. So this is one of the major improvements that we have. Now, you might be wondering, looking into this folio, you might be wondering, what are the tick boxes for? So the tick boxes are essentially used in combination with this button here, the functions that we have available here. And you see that some of the functions are marked as selected, so you'll be able to use these functions only for the selected charges that you want, or you have the other functions that are related to all the charges in the folio. One of the things that we changed or kind of improved is the fact that you can now select particular charges, let's say these two, or let's say the last 2 nights, and calculate the discount just for that particular selection. So let's say that for this particular booking for the last 2 nights, we actually want to apply a 10% discount. So I just select those, and I click here on functions, discount, and then I can write down what would be my discount percentage, and then just post it. And then we have our discount essentially going to be applied to the reservations that we, based on the charges that we have selected, we'll have the respective discount essentially applied. Here it is, and we see it. Now this is in the main event folio, obviously applied, where all these charges technically are. So you see, we can actually apply the discount because many of you know, with the current version, the current default version of the folios, a discount is applicable for essentially the whole folio. While in this case now we can select specific charges and apply discounts just for those. So otherwise, here you see some other functions that we have. As before, we have the transfer option, which we can transfer just the selected charges. We can edit the selected charges if we need to, and do a mass edit. So all the options that were available before are still here as well, with some other new improvements. Now you see the create advanced invoice, deduct advanced invoice options here. As mentioned, this would be a whole separate webinar, as the topic is very extensive, and will be actually there'll be more added to it fairly soon. So that is why, yeah, please keep an eye for our next invitation to have a look at the new concept of deposit and advance payments along with the new folios. So this is related to the charges. So as you can see, very, very useful, especially when we're talking about big folios, meaning folios with a lot of charges from a lot of different bookings, and the various filter options that we have, the select, and especially the discount. This has been a major feedback that we've had. The discount for the selected charges can be a very useful feature, and I believe many of you will be very happy and will have their work optimized based on this information. So yeah, essentially this is what we've done in regards to the charges section and the options that you have along with them. Now, in regards to the payment section, I'm not going to spend too much time because actually nothing has changed from before. You have the new payment button where you have still if you work with different currencies in your account, you have the calculation of the amount in the different currencies, the various payment options, types and subtypes, how the payment would be applied. And for those of you who use a payment processor connected from our partners, you have obviously this credit card button from where you can collect payments from the credit cards or from the cards of the guests, or do pre-authorizations. Again, nothing here has changed from before, just a design upgrade and an optimization, obviously, on the back end. But in terms of functionalities, buttons, how to use it, it's still the same. So yeah, this is in regards to the payment. So that's why I'm just not going to spend too much time, as nothing has changed drastically in terms of functionalities and so on. So, excuse me. Now, everything here, especially related to the charges, was possible, of course, and as you all know, while the folio is open. When we close the folio and issue an invoice or just close a folio, then changes to charges are not so, let's say, straightforward or direct as before. So when we close a folio, you see we have a warning that this folio is not fully paid. Do we want to still close it and issue an invoice? For the purposes of the presentation, I'm just going to close. Now, there are a couple of new functionalities that we have added with the new Folio screen. And the major one is this button here, Reopen Folio. Two very important points that I want to make here. Firstly, Reopen Folio does not exactly do as the name might entail, reopen. It's not going to be this invoice number 4634 is not going to suddenly just open and be again folio 593. No, there will be still a new folio with a new number, respectively, later on a new invoice number generated. So why I'm saying this? Because this might have very important accounting implications depending on your local law. So this is a functionality that it is going to be hugely useful functionality, but you do need to double check with your accounting team, with your accountant, finance team, if that is something that would be applicable in your case, based on your local law and accounting practices. What does this reopen folio do, and when is it useful? Well, many of you know that, let's say that we've issued an invoice for just a person, to the guest name. We issued an invoice, but then suddenly the guest came back and said, oh, can you actually issue this invoice in my company name so that I can do an expense account or reclaim VAT, whatever. They just want a company invoice. Many of you know what is the procedure now. We basically need to do a duplication, void a payment, or post a negative payment, then post a new payment in the duplicate, change the billing details, and so on. It's quite a manual process with several steps, and obviously there are places for mistakes, user mistakes. So in order to avoid these, basically what the reopen folio does is it combines all that into one. So what will it do? So here I have a closed folio, an invoice essentially, and I'm going to click on the reopen. Now the system asks me for a reason. Let's say on billing details. Why does it ask me for a reason? Well, because this folio that we are reopening, basically, this 593 or invoice 4634, is going to be voided automatically. So because it's going to be voided, it's very important for you to consult with your accountant if voiding an invoice is going to be applicable. I know from personal experience that in some cases, based on some local laws, that is not possible, or at least the reopening should happen on the day that you issued the wrong invoice, let's say. The reopening should be done at least on that day, because otherwise you risk having a payment that is on one date, but an invoice issued on a date after. I mean, and depending on local law, that might not be allowed. So this is why reopening of the folio is one of the functions that you definitely need to check with your accounting team, with your accountant, if it is applicable for you. Wrong billing details. And again, the reason is that the invoice that I issued will be voided. It's not going to be a full correction, but it's going to be a void. So that is the most important thing why you need to consult. Now, actually, before me reopening it, I also am going to apply a full payment here, because there is one also new change, an improvement related to the payment with this. So I confirm the operation and I do reopen. And now what the system does is it creates an exact duplicate of that folio. Here it is. It's in an open status. The old folio, respectively invoice, is going to be voided, as we mentioned. But what happens about the payment? You see, in the new folio, we do have actually the payment indicated. So essentially, the payment went from the old folio to the new folio, and that is a new function in the system related. Basically, is used only when we are reopening or voiding a folio that has a payment. We're actually we moved the payment from the old folio to the new folio. So most of you or all of you know, in the old version of the folios, whenever we move a payment, it's always a transfer. And we have the in-house transfer payment type with a negative amount in one folio and a positive amount in the other folio. With this functionality, when we're reopening a folio, or if we are completely voiding a folio that has a payment like this, here you see that the system now asks me, do I want to actually move this payment? So it's not going to transfer it with the in-house transfer payment type, but it's actually going to grab the payment with in this case, cash payment type, with the date that on when it was done. It will grab it and it will move it here to the new folio that was open when we did the reopen. And this has some very positive implications. Firstly, you don't have in-house transfer payment types, and especially on the invoice for the guests, which might create confusion for them. What is this in-house transfer? Why is it there? And also, if this was a card payment through one of our payment partners, um, this whole card payment is going to be transferred, meaning that you will still be able to, let's say, refund it from the new folio if a refund would be necessary, of course. So the system just grabs the payment as it is and moves it one for one to the new folio that was essentially reopened. That is what the reopen folio or reopen the invoice does. And now, of course, because it's in an open status, I can change the billing details to whatever the guest requested or anything else. So this way, we are avoiding 5 or 6 different manual steps where obviously a mistake can happen as well. We are basically consolidating all those different steps into one function, one button that will significantly speed up the process whenever you need to apply that. So these are a couple of the new functionalities that we added: the reopen option and the option to move a payment whenever you're voiding or reopening a whole folio. You can move the payment one for one from this folio to the other folio. This way, you're not losing any trails. Or, as mentioned, if it was a card payment, a transaction, you would grab the whole transaction and move it, and you still be able to, let's say, refund it from the new reopened folio. Now, in regards to the card payments, I just wanted to mention something about pre-authorizations. Because I also do keep an eye on the questions, and this is obviously an important one, so that's why I'm going to answer it now. Here, whenever you have a pre-authorization, so I'm just going to showcase it very quickly. Whenever we have a pre-authorization, I'll just use this as an example. So here we did a pre-authorization. We see now in the folio. This is also one of the major feedbacks from those of you who use the payment processors and do pre-authorizations, that before you are seeing if there is a pre-authorization only in the booking, but not actually in the folio. Now you see that there is a pre-authorization in the folio itself. And if you want to capture the pre-authorization or release the pre-authorization, you just go in the details of the payments, and here you have a pre-authorizations tab. Here you see the pre-authorization that was made, show more, and you can release it. Or by using the card button, you can then essentially charge. Here is the payment, here is the pre-authorization that we have, and we can capture the pre-authorization and actually convert it into an actual transaction, of course. So I hope this answers your question. You can basically charge the pre-authorization just by the green button, and here you see the pre-authorization to capture it. Or if you want to release it from the details, pre-authorization tab, show more, and then release the pre-authorization if you're not going to charge about that amount. So a small deviation, but indeed the pre-authorizations are an important topic. Many of you use it, so that's why I just wanted to showcase it to you here. So yeah, this is what the reopen does, and everything around it. Now, what else do we have here? Under more, we just have the regular duplicate option. Most of you are familiar with this from before. You can create a new folio directly from here related to the respective booking or event or company profile. You can create a new deposit one, which again, we'll explain more in the next webinar, or you can open the folio fast search from here as well to locate some other folios. Now, one of the other things that we added as a major functionality, just to, again, improve your work, optimize it, make it quicker, lower the chance of any potential mistakes, is the partial corrections. Whenever we have an invoice issued, but then suddenly we need to actually make a change to just a particular charge in that invoice. Especially in the EU, in most countries in the EU, that needs to happen with a correction document, a credit note or a credit invoice, or a debit note or a debit invoice, although less use the debit ones in general. So let's say that we've issued this invoice, and then the organizer comes and says, okay, for booking 312, actually, they stayed only one night. We talked with you. It's fine to just charge one night and not charge us for all the nights. Can we please remove them? So those of you who do partial corrections such as these know what is the process. We create a let's say full correction, and then we remove everything that doesn't manually remove everything that we are not modifying, and we only leave the charges that we are modifying. Excuse me. So a very cumbersome task indeed, a long process, and a lot of mistakes can be done. So to make things much more user-friendly and much less prone to mistakes, we've made a major improvement related to the partial corrections. So here is our invoice. We need to make a change for that reservation and remove 2 nights. So here is our create button. Next to, on the corrections line, we have the create button. So this would be a partial correction. Otherwise, the full correction is still here. If you need to cancel the whole invoice, it is still here. So you can, of course, apply. If you need to cancel the whole invoice, you just use the full correction. I see a question: is it possible to cancel the original invoice? Yes, you can still use the full correction to cancel the whole invoice and use the duplicate. To use the duplicate first to create a copy of the invoice in an open format, and then use the full correction to cancel the old invoice. So the full correction option does remain here, and it is fully usable and works the same way as before. But when we're talking about partial corrections, we have this new button here, create. We're creating, and now we have the charges from our various bookings. So you see them here listed down. And as we mentioned, the case was that we want to, or the organizer, together with us, agreed that actually these 2 nights are not going to be charged for. They need to be removed, essentially. So what I can do is I can come here, select those 2 nights, and I can use, for example, the mass options. That is one case. The other option is I can just individually change the quantity here to 0, for example. And when I proceed, essentially the system then automatically will generate the credit note in this case, with the respective changes that need to be applied. So there is no more removing all the unnecessary charges manually, and then manually making changes to the ones that remain here. Now you just say, okay, the last night zero quantity. The second to last night, zero quantity. And once you proceed, then the system, now you see when I click on issue, directly, immediately opens for me the credit invoice with the negative, of course, in this case, charges for the accommodation and for the nights that we are not charging. So all of this is immediately removed. How do we see the corrections? So we are now back into the actual invoice. You see now the indication that we have corrections for minus 300 euro. Here is going to where we are seeing if there are corrections, and we can just simply click, and that opens for us the correction. If we want to check it out, maybe print it again, email it, whatever we need to do. And then we can just click back so that we go back into our main invoice. So if you have more corrections here, they'll be listed down next to each other, basically in a new column. So very quickly, you can switch between the correction document that is applicable and the actual invoice. Yes, this is how we can apply the correction. Now, this is kind of a very straightforward case. And one thing as well, as you probably noticed, the system immediately opened the correction and then issued the credit invoice. There won't be a situation now as currently is possible, and it happens. We see it a lot. And based on that, we're making these improvements. We see correction documents that are not closed, which means that they are not active, basically not doing anything at the moment with the default old view. But now with the new view and with the new functionality when it comes to corrections, there isn't going to be a case where you have a correction document that is only open and it is not active, and it only clogs up your account basically in the various bookings. So this is also a major improvement point based on our analysis and based on the feedback and the questions that we're receiving. And we see a lot of, in a lot of accounts, we see open corrections that just stay and do nothing, essentially, apart from taking a folio number and just clogging up your system with elements and with data that you don't really need. Now, in terms of the corrections, there are also a couple of other very useful functionalities that we added. Again, the idea is just to make it much more easier for you to apply the corrections. And this is, again, for example, if we suddenly just want to change the price in an invoice for this accommodation, let's say that later on the organizer called us and said, hey, for booking 311, actually we agreed on a price of 100 euro, not 150 euro per night. Then what I can do is either manually just do this, and I can again proceed to issue my correction, and then the system automatically will issue the invoices, the credit invoice essentially with 3 charges for minus 50 euro. Or I can also, and let me just remove this, or we can use the mass functions here. So I can select the 3 charges, click on functions, click on set price, and I say, okay, the price for those 3 nights is 100 euro a piece. I click on OK, and you see automatically it's there. And when I proceed, we have our correction automatically generated by the system. And you don't need to worry about anything else. And there'll be no need to close and make the correction active. Again, once we complete this, it would be there. Another function, again related to this and coming from the functions, is the calculate discount. Again, after some time, once we've issued an invoice, maybe we need to apply a discount to the accommodation. Maybe we to the invoice. Maybe we've issued an invoice, but then there was some issue, and we agreed that we're going to give a 15% discount to this guest or to this folio, etc. So again, I can select my charges. I can use the quick buttons here, of course, absolutely fine. And I can click on functions, calculate discount, and say, okay, the discount is 15%. And you see automatically the system applies the new price here. And again, once I click on issue, the system automatically will create the correction. And you see the 3 nights times with the minus 22 euro. And once I click on issue, the credit invoice is done and dusted, created, active, and applied to the reservation. So yeah, that is one of the major improvements that we did. I believe many of you will agree that with the old version of the folios, these partial corrections whenever needed was quite a task. Again, it was a 5-6 step process with a lot of manual intervention, a lot of manual calculation as well. While here, you just say, okay, the final price needs to be 100, or the discount needs to be 10%, 15%, whatever. And then the system will take care of all the functionality, all the calculations, I'm sorry, creating the charges and issuing the correction document. So yeah, this is one of the major functions. I hope many of you will find this very useful. I know, especially in the EU and with the partial corrections and corrections in general, it's a thing that happens often, and now you can handle those situations very quickly without, worrying if your calculation is correct or if you've left the applicable charge that you need to change, whatever. You have much less worry when it comes to that, essentially. So yeah, these are kind of the main points, the main improvements and the new functionalities that we have released. Again, the deposits and advance payments, they are also a very big part. There is a whole new concept surrounding those. And just because of that, we are going to make a separate webinar just for that particular topic. For those of you who are interested in the deposits and advance payments, do keep an eye for our invitation for that webinar, so that you can make sure to register and attend, or at least register so that you can get the recording afterwards. Now, one thing else that we have done, we've had quite a lot of feedback throughout the years in regards to that, is related to actually the view of the folio, the design of the folio. And particularly with the information or some of the elements that are available in the folio or in the invoice. So what we have introduced, but that is just relates to the new folios, is the option for you to choose, easily to choose, what information to be included or not included in the invoice. So to make it, to show it, I'll just go into our new settings screen. Probably many of you have seen with the latest update, we have redesigned a lot of the screens, including a new settings screen. Again, much more optimized, search options, very much more intuitive and better organized. So again, I would suggest you, or at least for those of you who do settings, to get used to the new screen. But here under documents and under folio printing defaults, we have these various options. So some of these are already familiar from the from before, but here we have some new options. So you can define if you want to apply some margins to your template or to your invoice, but also here you can define if you want to hide some elements. For example, we want to hide payment details. I'll just select it, I'll save. And now when we go back and when we see here the payment number 107, cash payment number 107, when I refresh, you see now we don't actually see it. So that is, for example, one of the things that you can hide, or the payment term days. So this information here, if you don't want to show it and so on, it's not really something that is applicable in your case in all situations, you can just hide it from that. You can hide the tax table, for example. Any of these you can choose to hide. One of the things important here is that this is applicable also if you're using custom templates for the folios. As long as it is an information, as long as you're using our charge table, payment table, tax table in your custom template, these functions will apply to your custom templates as well. If you have built your own custom charge table, so essentially this part here, some of you may know it is possible. However, it's a very technical thing and very limited as well in terms of functionalities. You can actually build your own custom table, but again, very limited in functionalities and very difficult technically. So if you're using your own custom tables, these functions are not applicable. If you're using our tables, the placeholders in from our tables in your custom invoice template, these options will be applicable, and you can hide the source line, for example, or you can hide the payment term days, as we saw, or the payment details, and so on. So yeah, this is one also quite useful based on the feedback that we've received, based on the requests that we have received. This would be also something quite useful for, it seems, for many of you. So yeah, to be honest, essentially this is all in regards to the new folios. Where the various, what do the various buttons do, what are the new functionalities, and so on. So yeah, hope this was interesting and useful for you. I do see quite a lot of questions. As mentioned, we are going to basically reply to, if not all, at least most of these questions. However, we are going to reply because, again, it is quite a lot. We don't want to anybody to feel offended if we don't answer their question now. And obviously, it would be very time consuming. We are going, along with the recording, we are going to send you the answers to all these questions. The recording should be sent fairly soon, in the next day or two, so that you know, the information and the questions are still fresh. And a couple of reminders. Again, deposits and advance payments. So I see here just a question based on this example that we are seeing, and I believe it's an important one because I saw a couple of more similar. Now that why is my balance minus 300? Because originally the guest or the organizer paid the full amount, which was the charges. However, then with the correction, we made a correction for minus 300, And that is why we now have a minus 300 euro balance, because we basically need to refund 300 euro to the organizer because they overpaid, basically. So still, as before, I need to handle the refund manually. Refunds in Clock are always handled or initiated manually. Obviously, this is a very critical and significant task and action, and that is why we've left it to be a manual decision and a manual action. So now still I need to refund the money and post the negative payment. If it was cash, I just post a minus 300 euro cash payment. If it was a transaction, a card transaction, I can refund 300 euro via the transaction, and then I will have my balance essentially zeroed out, and then everything is clear, balanced, and there are no issues. So yeah, as mentioned, keep an eye for the next invite for those of you who are interested in the deposits and the advance payments concept that we are going to introduce and how that will tie in with the book direct as well. Keep an eye for the invitation for the next webinar. Actually, I see quite a lot of attendees from Bulgaria. Bear in mind that tomorrow there is going to be a webinar for the Bulgarian clients in terms of about this. And related to the fiscalizations there. So if you haven't registered for tomorrow's webinar, do register, which would be for the Bulgarian clients specifically. Yeah, that is all from me. Hope this was clear. Hope this was informative and helpful. I would love to hear your feedback. As for those of you who are attending every webinar, know we send a feedback form after the webinar. I would love to hear your feedback about it. And until next time and our next webinar. Thank you very much, and have a lovely rest of the day. Bye-bye.